Hi, and welcome back. We're excited to be here today. My name is Christine Glunz. I'm the Communications Director at the White House Council on Environmental Quality, and this is Greg Nelson.
I'm the Associate Director at the White House Office of Public Engagement.
So as many of you know, we've just finished our youth stakeholder briefing where we had emerging leaders from the clean energy economy here, and we had a great forum. We had Secretary Solis and Secretary Chu, Secretary Salazar, and Administrator Jackson. It was an incredible forum, and we'd like to continue online. We know that some of the questions that you had as Facebook users did not get answered during the forum, so we're welcome to continue to take your questions online on Facebook. And I know, Greg, you were looking for some insight on how we could continue outreach in the youth community.
Yeah, I think that one of the questions we'd love to dive into with everybody online is thinking about how do we continue this conversation. Had a great conversation on policy and getting to hear from some of the key leaders in the Obama administration about clean energy. I think that the next step for us is taking this conversation from here in Washington, D.C., and with this great group of emerging leaders to every community in the country. And you all have been leaders in your communities in starting this conversation on energy, on efficiency, on sustainability, and we want to figure out how we can work with you to continue those conversations and ensure that there's some opportunities for direct dialogue between us here in the administration and you all who are doing a lot of the really important work on a community level, whether that's around energy, it's around sustainability, it's around how we can support federal leadership and ensuring that we're developing this transformative clean energy economy. We know you have great ideas because we heard them here today in the forum and saw them online on Facebook, and we want to make sure that we take your energy and focus it on that as well.
And that's great. We've already had a couple suggestions come online. We've got Bryce Brickhouse, who thinks that continuing the conversation as project work groups, which is great. That's kind of happening right now as we speak. And Meg Boyle said invite us back to present to you in January. So I think that's encouraging. Definitely. Please feel free to continue the suggestions. Greg and I will talk about them as you bring them in. And I think we also want to answer a couple questions that came in during the stakeholder briefing that we didn't get to. One of which is on competitiveness. Francine in Tampa asked if EPA, DOE, DOL believe that green jobs are those manufacturing the tools for green industries need to be American jobs. And I think that's something that President Obama has been very clear about in building the green and clean energy economy. We want to make sure that these are American jobs and good paying jobs. We heard the Secretary of Labor talk about that a little bit. But
yeah, and tomorrow there's a forum here at the White House on jobs and economic growth, and there will be a breakout section that is focused particularly on the innovation agenda and green jobs. And the point of that breakout, which will be held in a very similar forum to this, will be to discuss how can we continue to develop opportunities within the clean energy sector that are going to help put Americans back to work, help train and develop and create these industries of tomorrow. And part of the reason that the president is so focused on clean energy and ensuring that we are leaders in it is because that means that America's always led the world in innovation. We've always had that opportunity, and it's been a way to help create an economic growth. For us, thinking about the engagement side of that means making sure that the great ideas that you have that are often being pioneered in cities with climate compacts on university campuses and looking at new technology with R&D or in sustainability strategies, that those compelling new ideas get a chance to come here so we can see them and also get shared with members of Congress, get shared with other leaders so that we can see how it's developing. We always talk about how one of the challenges here in Washington is we don't get the chance to hear and see from you all on a regular basis, and having events like this and having the opportunity to meet with you when we do come out in the field is an important part of that. In addition to the Job Summit tomorrow, I wanted to mention that on Friday, Administrator Jackson, who you all saw today, is going to be out in Seattle, Washington for a clean energy economy out there. They'll be focused on some of the issues particular to the Pacific Northwest, and we'd certainly love for you all to participate. There'll be an online component in that as well, and there will also be an opportunity for questions to be taken online that will be used in the forum. So please, if you're in the Pacific Northwest, get engaged in that, and if you're in the rest of the country, check it out online.
Okay, so I should mention that we are getting a flood of responses on how we
Great.
can be more engaging to the youth community, especially in clean energy. So these are great suggestions. Please keep them coming. I just want to mention a couple. So Sarah Vicassi says that youth forums throughout the country in different regions could help us. And I think you mentioned the Seattle event that's taking place on Friday, but just to mention to our Facebook users that we've been holding these clean energy forums throughout the country, and they have been a great tool for the cabinet secretaries and the administration to hear more back from the community. We've got the one you mentioned in Seattle. We've got the Virginia event taking place on Monday. We also we've been in Colorado. What are some of the other cities
We were
that
also
we've been to?
in Michigan, and about 2 months ago we were in Pennsylvania having similar discussions. Again, 200, 300 people getting the chance to have a real back and forth conversation with the cabinet secretaries who, I think it's a great opportunity to reflect on what a remarkable group that is, and we hope that you all do get the chance to continue to work with them on Facebook or directly, getting a chance to hear from Secretary Chu, Secretary Salazar, Administrator Jackson, and Secretary Solis back to back is pretty exciting for all of us.
Yes, and we had another suggestion from Jeremy Pesner, who said from New York, and said continued policy sessions would be a great idea. Perhaps we should engage our local politicians who can set up a tree structure and forward questions and ideas up the chain of command. I do want to mention, as the communications director at CEQ, I've had the privilege to travel the country with our chair, Nancy Sutley, and we've been to cities across the country, whether it be, Philadelphia or Los Angeles. We've been to Seattle. We've been to all parts of the Midwest, and there is a lot of engagement on a local level, whether it be your mayor, your governor, your county exec. I'd say throughout the country there are activities that are probably taking place in your local community that you might not know about. You had hosted a number of state legislators, right? And so I would suggest to Facebook users, look to your local community. I know in New York City there and New York State, they've got a huge weatherization program that's been very successful, and so I think that there are opportunities there as well.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point that on the engagement and outreach conversation, part of it is certainly directed at thinking about policy and engaging this conversation across the country. But one part to think about, to touch on Christine's point around the weatherization dollars, it's also about taking advantage of the opportunities that we have in front of us right now to prove that this clean energy economy can be an important part of building our economy out of the recession we're in now, and creating new opportunities for people. So as Secretary Chu mentioned and Secretary Solis both mentioned, there's about $5 billion in weatherization funds that are currently moving out into your states and into your cities. Those are going to governors and mayors to help distribute and do weatherization in those communities. And there's about $500 million of green jobs training money that will go out to support developing jobs programs, training programs to help workers generate the skills to be able to tackle those retrofit projects. And that's money that goes down to the state and local level. And the best way for you to engage in that is to find out what's going on in your community with these dollars and how you can help shape and impact and support the great work that's going on. If we can do an amazing amount of weatherization, if we can develop new industries using these dollars, then we'll be able to prove not just to ourselves, but also to the community and some of the elected leaders that this is a real important opportunity for us to take advantage of. And we really want these dollars to be well spent and well used and be an important part of greening our country.
Okay, so during the forum, and please keep continuing to ask questions to both Greg and I on the Facebook chat, but during the forum we had a great question on green construction. And this was from Bryce Brickhouse from Louisville, Kentucky. And he said that he's concerned that most funding for green construction is for new construction and not for teaching people to modify and adapt appropriately. So one thing I wanted to mention is that this huge interagency effort that's underway called Recovery Through Retrofit. And you can find more information about it on the CEQ website. That's whitehouse.gov/CEQ, and it's under the initiatives page. And it talks about how we've got the $5 billion in the Recovery Act for weatherization, but we're looking to make weatherization and the retrofit industry thrive beyond those 5 years. And so the Recovery Through Retrofit is a report that a number of agencies, anywhere from the EPA, Department of Labor, USDA, came together and developed these series and sets of proposals to look at on making the retrofit industry thrive. So these are good green jobs, and it's a collective effort among all of these agencies to put forth recommendations to the president on how to make this long-term approach to weatherization. And so it isn't just new construction. I mean, we have looked at new construction, of course. LEED certification is something that we talk about fairly frequently, and we've got dollars in the Recovery Act as well under GSA for new construction, but we're also looking at weatherization as a longer-term approach and retrofitting. Is there anything else you want to add on that?
I think this is again a topic that I'm certain will come up tomorrow in the job summit, and it's something that's been discussed quite a bit in the media, and the opportunities for developing an efficiency and retrofit industry in this country, and that is mostly focused on existing buildings, commercial and residential, as well as industrial. One thing I wanted to kind of come back to is we really need your help and thinking about how to get out information about both weatherization programs, the work that Christine and CEQ did on the Recovery Through Retrofit, and about events like this across the country. You all have networks, you all have groups of friends, you have committed allies who are working hard to get out the word about the clean energy opportunities, and you can do that in a way that we can't. We'll make sure that we can commit to sharing on the White House website through email networks and now through a lot of the people who are attending today, making sure we share with them the work that we're doing, and then we're going to ask you to commit to making sure you're sharing that out to your networks and getting people engaged. It is a challenging thing to keep people involved and excited about something like weatherization and retrofit, but it's incredibly important. And the more that we can get your help in sharing the word about the opportunities, I think the better the impact we're going to have, and it's going to be a dramatic change.
So one suggestion we have coming in through here is, sounds like the Department of Education should be a part of this forum and discussion, and that's from Amy Traeger, who I think has been on here talking about, I think that she is a teacher herself. Right. So I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Under the Obama administration, we have the privilege of having a very diverse green team, and that isn't just the traditional cabinet secretaries you would consider. We had a number of cabinet secretaries here today from the Department of Interior, the Department of Labor, EPA, of course, and Department of Energy. But the green team in the Obama administration also includes, the Secretary of Transportation. It also includes a lot of involvement from the VA. Greg and I work on an energy team that meets very regularly with all of these agencies, and they're all well represented. I think the energy agenda that the president is putting forth goes into not just education, but also looking into, what can the EPA do, but what can the VA do? The VA has facilities across the country that they're greening. The Department of Defense, we have the president signed a sustainability executive order looking at greening the federal government, and the Department of Defense has been a leader in this effort on creating new and innovative ways. So it is, of course, the EPA and the Department of Interior and Department of Labor, Department of Energy, who we've seen here today, but the Department of Education is involved, the VA is involved, and many others.
Yeah, it's safe to say it's an administration-wide commitment. But what I'd say that is it's a reflection of the work that you all have done in helping to raise the issue in your communities. I think about a month ago, the number of mayors that have signed the Mayor's Climate Agreement reached 1,000. I think you were in Seattle when that happened.
Yes, very exciting.
At the Mayor's Conference out in Seattle, and there are about I think it's over 30 governors that have signed a similar letter for governors. So this is happening, and there's great leadership at the local level and at the state level. And I would continue to that advocacy and that local leadership is a big part of what helps us to illustrate what these possibilities could be at the national level and why national policy matters, because we can do some of this important work you're piloting at a national level. So working with your mayors, your city council people, your governors, state legislators who can play a key role in this is really critical in ensuring that we prove that this can get done.
Okay, Greg, I think we have a great question for you. There's a lot of chat online. Again, we're live on Facebook, and they want to know how they can get involved. So we've been mentioning a lot of things that are underway, and certainly we all know about it because we're in this all day, every day. But we've had a lot of suggestions of how people can get involved. They're talking to each other, of course, our Facebook users. And one, Mandy Hancock, suggested search for groups. So she's from Gainesville, Florida. Search for groups already in existence before starting on your own. If you don't find what you're looking for, start your own. But lots of groups are already working in your community and states on these issues. And I think we've certainly found that to be the case. As we travel throughout the country and as we are here in Washington, we hear about a lot of groups who are focused on either innovation, green technologies, weatherization, energy efficiency, green jobs. What are some of the other groups that you've worked with? And these are literally from coast to coast. Seattle, Washington State, Florida.
I think that it's a great point from Andy that the organizing is happening. And again, this is an exciting difference perhaps from a couple of years ago and seeing all this grassroots support for change. And it is important to look around and find out what's already out there. I think Facebook and social media are a great way to do that. There are a number of national umbrella organizations that are doing great work that I think it would be good to look into. And I think one piece that we haven't really mentioned is, in addition to organizing and advocacy, part of the reason that we're so excited about the clean energy economy is the business opportunity in it. We had a group of in the group of 130 folks who are here today, there were a number of young business leaders, people who looked around, saw some opportunity, and decided that they wanted to be part of creating a company and a business that's going to create change. Some of them are working with utilities companies to figure out how to help consumers lower their power bills. We have a couple that are working on vehicle companies, smart cars, and looking at different opportunities with electrical cars. But it is can't say enough how important it is to have that young entrepreneur voice as part of this conversation. And heck, if you can have a great idea and can build a business around it, there's a lot of people looking at how to invest in this space and how to help great businesses. And that's going to be a key part of our economic recovery. And we want young people, young leaders, young entrepreneurs to be a part of that.
Okay, and this has definitely spurred a lot of activity. I think we have a lot of Facebook users who may belong to some of these local organizations, so please keep talking about this among yourselves. I think that if you can link up on social networks like this, like you mentioned, it's great for everyone, because we do have an energy bill to pass. And one question I think that's great, we've been talking about green jobs, and we've got a question from John Furtado, who wants to know, has the administration considered bringing back a program like the Civilian Conservation Corps in order to create jobs directly to sustainable development? So one thing I want to mention is that during the forum today, the Secretary of Interior, Secretary Salazar, who is a fabulous Secretary of Interior, had really made a push out. I believe it's called the Conservation Corps, but I would encourage users to check out the Department of Interior website. He talks about this program throughout the country, and I think it would be worth definitely checking out. There are green job opportunities, like you said, in our national parks, in conservation, not just weatherization, not just solar power and wind farms, but also opportunities there in conservation for sure.
And I think one of the things Secretary Salazar mentions regularly is it's a significant percentage of parkland that actually exists inside our urban areas, and even a national parkland. I don't remember the exact percentage, but it's a fairly high one. And those are areas where conservation corps are critical, and there are existing job opportunities. So you don't have to necessarily go to the Grand Canyon, although it's amazing and beautiful. You can also do that from a lot of areas where you may live right now.
So we've got a little bit of discussion underway here online about what happens if we do nothing. We're at the cusp of building a clean energy economy. The president has put in $80 billion of clean energy investments in the Recovery Act. At the same time, we are working hard on an energy bill. The president's laid out what the principles are for passing an energy bill, and we've got Copenhagen underway. We've heard some discussion, this is some of the discussion online, about what happens if we do nothing. And I think Secretary Chu spoke a little bit about that during our forum today. And I think we all know that the president has made a strong commitment both domestically and internationally. Did you want to talk a little bit about?
Yeah, I think that's where the power of energy and advocacy is so vital in that having you guys are having this conversation. You're part of this forum today because you believe that action is urgent and important. That's not necessarily the case in the rest of the country. So we want to make sure that we make that case. The best way to make the case, I think, is by talking about the opportunities and talking about how and then really starting to show those opportunities. And that's why we come back to things like weatherization and entrepreneurship and looking at the real opportunities in a clean energy economy, because rather than just telling people what's going to happen if we don't take any kind of significant action now, we can start to show and highlight some of the real positive changes that can happen in their lives and their communities if we do start thinking with a greater lens of sustainability, if we start relying on the federal government and state government to provide real leadership in energy efficiency and power generation, if we encourage more renewable energy development, it starts to impact it. It becomes the norm, and it becomes part of what and how people see their lives. So for us, the powers of the status quo in any situation are very, very strong, and it's always hard to get people to look down the road and not fear what's there. Your vision, your advocacy, your ability to help illustrate that alongside us is incredibly important, and that's part of why we're asking you for ideas and also asking you for stories. One thing that we didn't mention is that on the White House website, and actually at the Recovery Through Retrofit website that Christine talked about, there's an opportunity for feedback on there, and we'd encourage you to come on that site and provide feedback to the work we've been doing, but also give us your stories. If you're working in an area that is generating jobs, if you're trying to retrofit your communities, if you're looking at efficiency in your neighborhood, we want to know how that's working, what kinds of jobs are being created, what are homeowners saying back when you come and talk to them about efficiency, and little things like changing the light bulbs or big things like putting solar on your rooftops. That's a door-to-door conversation in lots of parts of the country, and we're looking for firsthand experience about what you're seeing and how you're hearing.
So there's just one Jordan Chabalowski. Sorry, I'm not pronouncing that last name, but I asked if anyone was from Wisconsin. I'm from Northern Illinois, but I will tell you, which is close to Wisconsin. I was just there last weekend. But Governor Doyle in Wisconsin, the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack, my boss, Nancy Sutley, and Governor Doyle were all visiting a farm who worked on, it was a sustainable farm in Wisconsin. I want to say it was a month ago. And I just wanted to let you know there are definitely organizations in Wisconsin. I know the governor's really been out there on sustainable energy. And so I'm sure if you look around, you will be able to find organizations in Wisconsin. There are organizations across the country who are trying to move this ball forward. And one other, so I just wanted to mention that, of course, shout out to the Midwest.
I think talking particularly about rural communities as well.
Right.
And I think when weatherization gets discussed, it's usually talking about urban communities and places where we have a high population. But the opportunities in the clean energy economy are very prevalent in the rural communities as well, and looking at both clean energy development, but also there's going to be a lot of high-tech manufacturing that is going to need to happen in order for us to develop these products. And in the U.S., a lot of that happens in rural and semi-rural areas. And I grew up in Oregon, and we're always looking for new industries out there. And there are a couple of neat companies that have been created up in the Portland suburbs looking at new cars, new batteries, and we even have the first or the only U.S. streetcar manufacturer in Portland now, and we're real excited about that.
So here's one area that we haven't covered yet, which is actually very important both to the president and to the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Lisa Jackson. We have a question from C. Aloma Romeo, who says there has been a lot of discussion about clean air, global warming, etc. However, there has been little discussion regarding the pertinence of environmental justice issues to the administration. What is the level of concern? Well, I can tell you, if you take a look at the Environmental Protection Agency website, I think it's just been in the last week that the administrator had put out a huge effort on environmental justice, and it's definitely a focus of hers. It's something that she's talked about. She might have even talked about it a little bit today, but it's been a serious focus of hers. And I know that, Greg, you work with a lot of environmental justice groups. I don't know if you can talk about some of the work that's underway in coordinating with the administration to move that issue forward.
Yeah, and I think if you look for a speech the administrator gave called Changing the Face of Environmentalism.
That's right.
It's a great outline of the types of things that we can do both at the EPA and across the administration to address environmental justice issues. And she breaks it down into reducing harm, reducing pollution in key areas, and then providing opportunity. One part of environmental justice is the lack of opportunity in these same areas that are being hit hardest by pollution, and tying those two together, so tying our economic development planning with our environmental impact reduction work is critical. A lot of the places that have been negatively impacted over the last 60, 80, 100 years by particularly in urban areas, are also in ripe spots for transportation hubs and rail lines, ports. Great options for new manufacturing and new clean energy work, but we need to go in and create those opportunities in these areas and look for specific chances to do that. One other thing I'd say is we hosted during the transition, and then also a couple weeks ago a briefing similar to this, but discussing environmental justice issues. And about 10 days ago, we had a group of leaders in from across the country to help discuss the public health impacts of energy and looking at how the positive benefits of transitioning from our current energy economy to a clean energy economy and the impact that can have on public health. And what struck me most about that was Secretary Sebelius, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, talking about the massive cost to our public health system that the pollution has and the impact it has from kids from asthma in children, lost school days, all the way up through the traditional brownfields and some of the Superfund sites that we may all be familiar with. It's a tremendous burden on the economy. We need we'll have that success in transitioning away from that if we can also build this clean energy economy.
So here's another engagement question, but it's from Sandy Rudd Strasberg, who wants to know, how do we get all the great people online chatting now to come together and make change happen in this area?
It's a great
so
question.
You can take the first part of that.
Well, I think you're doing the most important part now, which is getting together, and I think there have been a lot of good links shared on the Facebook chat and organizations that people are part of. If you're here, if you're engaged, then please do share the organization that you're working with so that everybody else can get a chance to see it and find a local chapter and join. I think that's critical. Also, I think finding a way to make sure that you're staying engaged both in the national debate, which, again, because you're here with us today, hopefully you are, but that meeting people through these conversations that you can do some local organizing work with. Like I said, there's just a remarkable amount of innovation that's happening at the local level right now, and we are looking for opportunities to highlight that, and again, send us your story so we can tackle it. We also on the White House website regularly are doing blog postings from each of the forums that we've been discussing. So if you want to keep up to date with it, go to the whitehouse.gov site. If you click on the issues area, it has an energy and environment area. and you can subscribe to that blog feed. You'll then learn about the energy forums that we're doing. We are always asking the secretaries and people who travel with them to post about it, post pictures, post video, talk about their experience, and it's a great place to share stories of people we've met along the way who are doing innovative work out in the communities. We'll make sure we post a link to that so you guys can get to it directly, but if you go to the whitehouse.gov site, you can find it.
That's right. I will say, as a communications director at one of the councils here at the White House, we do try to keep that White House blog up and updated. And the cabinet secretaries, when they go to visit, these businesses or organizations that are moving the clean energy economy forward, they do talk about where they've been, and oftentimes if you check back, you can see that you didn't know there is a company in your area who has been really focusing on, whether it be solar panels or wind turbines, but window manufacturers who are part of the overall weatherization vision that we have. So you really never know what you might find on whitehouse.gov. I'm sure our web folks appreciate the plug for that too. And I have to make a plug for Secretary Chu's Facebook page as well, because I know he keeps that updated, and he talks about where he's been and where he's going, and certainly he visits a lot of clean tech and clean industry innovators throughout the country, and so you might find a local business owner that you didn't know about. So here's a question from Dara Mort, and the question is, how do we plan on keeping green industries domestic? So you want to start talking about that? I know competitiveness is American competitiveness is something we talk about a lot.
It's a great question, and thanks for asking it. The way that the secretaries talked about it and the president's talked about it, and I think it's why this is such a focus, is we believe that first and foremost we need to be the innovators and the leaders in creating the technology of tomorrow that's going to create these industries. If we can create these technologies first and foremost here, then we'll have the opportunity to make sure that as a result we're creating good, high quality jobs. But it can't stop with just creating the technology. We have to also create a domestic market. When you look at something like solar panels, there's a reason why most of the solar panel manufacturers make their panels overseas, because in a lot of cases that's where the markets are. There long been strong markets in Germany, in Spain, in China, and India, places where this is happening at a significant pace. If you're a solar company and you're developing new technology here in the U.S., you might still want to manufacture it overseas if that's where your customers are. We want to make sure that we've got good, strong markets here for all those industries, so that we can have the manufacturing here, the high quality jobs here. In addition, there's when you look at a wind turbine itself, it requires, I can't remember the exact stat, but it's dozens of suppliers, dozens of different component parts in order to be able to manufacture that. Each of those are different manufacturing facilities, different sets of jobs, different companies and opportunities to build it. So the way that Secretary Locke from the Department of Commerce and Secretary Chu have discussed it in previous conversations like this is, if we can help create those industries here, we can build the market here, then we're going to not only have the opportunity to lead in the technology, but we're going to lead in job creation, and we're going to be able to have a huge impact on our energy economy at the same time.
Okay, so we have we have a lot of great questions. So, but here are a couple ones to highlight. We have a question from Jenny Bedell Stiles, who said, I am also concerned that stimulus money going to support green jobs is predominantly benefiting men and leaving out women. How can we ensure that stimulus money is being justly spent? So the Secretary of Labor today here, Secretary Solis, a female, had talked about some of the weatherization dollars and the $5 billion for weatherization and the importance of keeping it moving, and we already talked about the recovery through retrofit, which is kind of this long-term plan for building the retrofit industry. I do want to mention that Secretary Solis and my boss, Chair Sutley, on Earth Day held a fabulous forum of women leaders in the clean energy industry, and posed this and discussed this exact question. And I just want to chime in, please. assure you that this is something that both my boss and I know Secretary Solis and many of the Green Cabinet members think about consistently, is making sure that this is not only gender balanced, but also that the clean energy economy is as diverse as our Green Cabinet. We have Secretary Chu and Secretary Salazar, Secretary Solis, Chair Sutley. I mean, it's absolutely incredible.
Pretty remarkable group.
But we have brought together organizations and business leaders and posed this exact question, and I think it's probably a conversation that happens in your office too.
Yeah, and the head of our office is a woman named Valerie Jarrett, and Valerie created a group called the Council on Women and Girls that's working within the federal family to ensure opportunity for women and girls, looking at a couple areas. One is certainly women-run businesses, and again, the industry creation side of this is an incredible opportunity in ensuring that many of those businesses are created and run by women is a big challenge, and something that we think is a great opportunity for the stimulus dollars, for just ensuring that these industries are at the start of the industry, we're giving everybody a fair shot, and creating some equity in when the opportunities that are there. The other piece of this is education, and we had a question earlier about the Department of Education. The President has committed to ensuring that science, technology, engineering, and math education, STEM education, is something that we focus on in this administration. About a week ago, we had an event here where the President shared some of his thoughts on it, and also highlighted some programs that private industry is doing to help support STEM education, particularly focused on women and girls. And we had a robot that was here at the White House that some students had built, and alongside us in the audience was a group of a girls robotics team from a local high school that had competed in the competition. So it was really exciting to see both having a robot here on site, which was pretty cool.
Yes.
And the youth that had put it together. But if we're going to truly lead in the clean energy economy, it can't just start with people who are creating businesses now. We have to go back and look at our education system and ensure that not only are we providing resources for traditionally underserved people to get a chance to have access to a lab, have access to science facilities, so that they can even learn and study those skills. But more important, that it's interesting and cool and fun. And we had a great conversation with a group of game developers. Folks are building video games, and it's actually a pretty diverse group. They use graphics, science, math in order to develop these games, and it's an incredible opportunity, and a lot of them are educational facilities. So I just think that we need to break out a little bit of the mold that we're in, and thinking about what's a science job versus what's a math job versus what's a creative job. They're blending in a way that if we can build up their education system, we have a great chance of leading the world.
So we are having a lot of activity naturally online on our Facebook discussion about Copenhagen, which is great. And I just want to mention that for our Facebook users at whitehouse.gov, what was mentioned earlier today, we had Billy from the State Department come in and talk about the social media component of Copenhagen, and I can assure you the State Department will be working very hard over the next 2 weeks to make sure that everything that's happening in Copenhagen is updated on the State Department website, but on the State Department Facebook page. I'm not sure if they have a Twitter, but you can find out at the State Department website. But they'll be keeping all of us appraised on what's happening, both during the negotiations and we've got an impressive lineup of cabinet secretaries who will be attending to talk about what we've done in the Obama administration on the domestic end, which we heard a lot about today. But
yeah, and if you weren't able to watch the forum earlier, Billy gave the website address, and the easy way to go is to find it on state.gov, state.gov.
That's right.
But it's at COP15, COP 15.state.gov is the direct line to the State Department website, and it's Copenhagen's 2 weeks long. There's going to be a lot of activity going on there, a lot of interesting conversations. As Christine mentioned, we have I think 5 cabinet secretaries going. The president will be there next week, and we're real excited to help continue the leadership that the cabinet and the president have provided in an international arena as well. I think one of the key aspects of that is helping to share the opportunities that come out of COP15 with your local community. So getting informed about the other conversations that are happening there. It's thousands of people there. Only a few of them are working on the negotiations. Most of them are working on how do we build this opportunity in this economy, and that's going to be I hope the real story coming out of Copenhagen.
So David Hopkins who just asked us a question or made a suggestion, I guess, online. Let's do an environmental award of greenest city efforts to raise standards as a competition among policymakers or mayors. So this is an interesting concept, but I do want to just mention is that a lot of us have had the opportunity to visit some of the cities and first of all, not only talk about what the cities have been doing at a local level, but also see firsthand at the efforts that were underway. Chair Sutley had just mentioned that she had been to Ithaca, New York recently and visited Cornell. I know a lot of the cabinet secretaries have visited the universities, but also she has been and witness of what the efforts are underway in Cleveland. And Seattle, of course, Los Angeles, and then a number of the cabinet secretaries. I think Secretary or Administrator Jackson had mentioned Philadelphia as well. But there are efforts underway in cities throughout the U.S. and as you had mentioned previously, the mayors whose efforts. How many mayors are there?
They just went over the 1,000 mark.
Right. Yeah. So certainly there are efforts underway in your local communities to green cities throughout the country. The leadership at the local level has been exciting, but I also want to give a shout out to the university students who are out there. I think it's called the President's Climate Compact, which was an effort that really began, like so many others, as student activism and getting their universities to be leaders in developing climate change solutions and also in committing to reduce the impact of the university itself. I think most college campuses now have signed on the compact. If your university hasn't, you can take a look, and you can also find out what your university is doing to help combat climate change and look at the energy efficiency. Again, I think it's called the President's Climate Compact, but I'm sure someone on here will have the exact link for it. Okay, so I think we just have time for one more question, but I do want to mention to all of our Facebook users, this is not ending here with Greg and I. Come back and join us at 7 p.m. Eastern. We will be reconvening the group who was here for the Youth Stakeholder Forum, and so please come back and join us at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. But one of the questions we have from Vanessa Fixmer-Ores said, I know that one of the main problems with climate change is that people see it as an environmental issue. It's clear that energy economy and the environment are interconnected. What are your suggestions for getting over this hurdle? And this question is from Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina. So I would just start off by saying, and I'll let Greg answer a lot of this, but we have the privilege of working for a president who knows that a strong economy and a clean and clear environment go hand in hand. And certainly we have environmental challenges, and we also have a huge opportunity to build a clean energy economy. And that's why we've been holding these stakeholder briefings here and throughout the country, because we know that these efforts are already underway. And the President's made investments in the Recovery Act to build on those investments, but wants to longer term get the rules right and make sure that we are dependent on cleaner sources of energy. We reduce our dependence on oil, that we limit the risk of climate change, and we also build this economy and improve the clean air we're breathing and the water we're drinking at the same time. So it's quite a task, but
and I think that how do we the question from Raleigh was us looking at how do we what are some suggestions for getting over this hurdle to help people see how it's connected, and I think again our real task has got to be to illustrate what this can look like done the right way, and there are green businesses in every community that are doing a great job of highlighting how this can happen, how you can be a successful business, how you can create jobs, how you can create prosperity in your community while living sustainably and doing it with a responsibility on energy. And I think that finding those businesses, starting your own, and being part of it is really critical. We also have a bunch of resources at the federal level that can help you do that. There's a website called, I think it's sustainability.gov, that's all about looking at the federal sustainability efforts. But if you go to the Commerce Department website or the Small Business Administration website, there's a significant amount of grant funding through the Recovery Act to help small businesses get started. And some of that focus is on green industries and looking at in particular at small businesses, small green businesses that can help be the real engines of growth in your community. So if you see a good idea, jump in. As we're trying to support it here, and we also love to highlight it whenever we travel. So share them with us as you build your businesses.
So one quick thing I want to mention before we wrap up is that one thing that we had forgotten. I don't think we had mentioned. Aaron Moran had mentioned that the University President's Initiative and their climate commitment, and I think it's important for this youth discussion, especially today. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk quickly about what these university presidents have done? This letter, is it? It's a commitment that they've all signed, and I think Aaron's got the right language. It's the University President's Climate Commitment. So you can throw that into a search engine and find it. But it commits each university campus, the president signs it, to developing a plan for sustainability and climate change on your campus. It's similar to what the mayors have done in ensuring that that their cities have a real plan for reducing emissions, reducing energy use, and increasing sustainability in your community. So again, I think they're great examples of local leadership, and then taking the wisdom and the knowledge you get from that activism and sharing it out so that other people in other communities can benefit from it. Ultimately, that's whether it's mandated at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level, or whether it's bubbling up from the grassroots. We're all going to need to figure out the best solutions for how to get it done in our communities, and it's heartening for us to see that people aren't waiting for it. They're getting it done themselves. Okay, so I think we have to wrap it up, but we've had a great discussion online, and we really appreciate everyone participating. And again, don't stop now. We have more to come. At 7 p.m. we'll do a closing, and we really appreciate your participation. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.